EU targets US Coyote drones in defense power shift.
NATO faces drone crisis as Europe builds its own shield.
The Coyote contract war just moved to Brussels.
Billions on the line as EU redraws drone defense.
The Coyote was born to hunt enemy drones, but now it's the one being hunted by European politics. As the EU pushes its drone wall across the continent, leaders are quietly asking if they still need Washington's technology at all. Behind closed doors, lobbyists, generals, and tech giants are fighting over contracts that could decide who dominates the next decade of air warfare. And every move is being watched by Moscow, Beijing, and the American defense industry that has everything to lose. It started as a security plan along the EU's eastern border, a drone wall meant to detect and block Russian surveillance and strike drones slipping through the skies of Finland, Poland, and the Baltics. But in just a few months, that wall became something far bigger, a political and industrial line between Europe and America. The European Commission's new proposal, unveiled in mid-October 2025, expands the project across the entire continent, from the Arctic to the Mediterranean. It's now a continent-wide counter-unmanned aerial system C-UAS network, integrating sensors, radars, jammers, and AI-based command hubs into one massive air defense shield. The cost? Analysts estimate between 10 and 12 billion euros over the next decade. The opportunity? Enough to feed Europe's growing hunger for defense independence and to threaten America's billion-dollar drone defense exports. For years, the U.S. dominated this field. Raytheon's Coyote Block 2 interceptor became a star of the Ukraine war. The drone could detect, chase, and destroy Iranian-made Shahed drones within seconds, an essential tool against swarms that overwhelm traditional air defenses. The Pentagon ordered thousands. Poland bought them. Lithuania and Finland asked for demonstrations. Even Germany tested integration with its Patriot batteries. So why the sudden turn away?
Because Europe learned a painful lesson. Dependence comes at a price. During the Ukraine war, American C-UAS parts were prioritized for U.S. stockpiles, delaying deliveries to allies. When the U.S. Congress stalled defense budget approvals in 2024, contracts froze, leaving European armies waiting months for replacements. And in that gap, a new idea grew. What if Europe built its own? That idea now has a name: the European Drone Shield Initiative. It's being championed by France's Thales, Germany's Rheinmetall, and Italy's Leonardo. Together, they want to create a homegrown alternative to the Coyote system, designed to integrate with the EU's new drone wall, and funded partly through the European Defence Fund, which has already committed 1.5 billion euros for collaborative anti-drone research. For Washington, this is no small concern. U.S. defense exports to Europe reached $75 billion in 2024, a record high. Around 15% of that came from drone and counter-drone systems, including the Coyote, FAAD-C2, and Lockheed's Morpheus micromissile. Losing that share would hit not just profits, but political leverage, the quiet influence that comes from supplying your allies' defense backbone. And that's why the Coyote has become more than a weapon. It's now a symbol of who leads NATO's next era: the US or a self-reliant Europe. Inside NATO briefings, the argument is growing sharper. The US delegation insists that integration and interoperability require standardized systems, meaning in plain English, stick with what works: American tech. European defense ministers counter that standardization shouldn't mean dependence. As one senior EU official told Reuters, NATO's unity cannot mean monopoly.
The divide runs deeper than hardware. Europe wants digital sovereignty, control over its defense data. Washington's C-UAS systems send telemetry and targeting feeds through US-linked cloud infrastructures. European states worry that in a crisis, that data could be restricted, delayed, or even weaponized politically. So, the drone wall at its core isn't just about keeping drones out, it's about keeping control in. Still, reality complicates ideals. The U.S. systems are proven. The Coyote has a 95% intercept rate in field trials, with production already scaled across Raytheon's Tucson and Huntsville plants. European prototypes, by contrast, are years from mass deployment. Poland's PIT Radwar jammer array, Estonia's radar network, France's RX-30 interceptor, all promising but fragmented. The EU's dream of a unified anti-drone grid requires full coordination, something it has never achieved in defense procurement. And Moscow knows it. Russia's drone industry has quadrupled production since 2022. Its new Lancet 4 and Itomos drones are cheap, fast, and almost disposable, designed to swarm and overwhelm static defenses. Each costs less than $30,000. A single Coyote interceptor costs 10 times that. It's a numbers game, and the side that masters low-cost network defenses wins. So, as the EU lays the foundation for its drone wall, every capital is doing its own math. Berlin wants autonomy. Warsaw wants rapid delivery. Paris wants leadership. Washington wants loyalty. And somewhere between those desires lies NATO, an alliance stretched between ideology and necessity. In theory, everyone wants the same thing: safety, coordination, deterrence. In practice, it's a contest of control. Who builds the wall, who supplies the tech, who gets the data.
The EU says it's about resilience. The US sees it as retreat. And the Coyote? It's caught in the middle. A drone built to hunt enemies, now hunted by its own allies' ambitions. But the story doesn't end at the border. The next phase of this fight moves into NATO headquarters, defense budgets, and global arms markets, where the consequences of Europe's drone wall could redefine Western power itself. The debate has reached the heart of NATO, and it's no longer about technology alone. It's about trust, dependency, and the unspoken fear that America's defense dominance may no longer be permanent. In late September 2025, during a closed NATO defense ministers meeting in Brussels, the topic wasn't Ukraine or Russia, it was counter-drone integration. The US delegation, led by Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, pushed hard for what it called operational coherence, a polite term for keeping NATO aligned on American-built systems. But behind the microphones, European ministers were restless. France's Sébastien Lecornu reportedly told colleagues that Europe must be capable of neutralizing threats with European solutions. Germany's Boris Pistorius nodded in agreement. Poland, always the security hawk, stayed silent, knowing it relies on US weapons more than anyone else. And so, the alliance that once shared a single vision of defense unity now faces two paths: buy American or build European. The numbers tell the story. Raytheon's Coyote C-UAS system, including radar, command modules, and launchers, cost about $550,000 per unit. European firms propose to cut that to under 300,000 euros, using modular, AI-driven interceptors and domestically sourced sensors. The savings are huge, but so are the risks.
European prototypes like the Skyguard EU and Hermes Shield haven't faced real-world swarm attacks. By contrast, the Coyote system has logged over 7,000 successful intercepts in US and Ukrainian theaters combined. To soldiers on the ground, performance matters more than politics. But to defense ministers, politics often is performance. And here's the twist: the US isn't just selling hardware, it's selling time. Every contract includes long-term maintenance, training, and access to updates. If Europe builds its own, it also inherits the responsibility for constant evolution, upgrades, supply chains, threat intelligence. That means building not just drones, but an entire defense ecosystem from scratch. It sounds visionary, but it also sounds familiar, because that's exactly how NATO's US-backed integrated air and missile defense system began 2 decades ago. History, it seems, is repeating with a European accent. Meanwhile, Washington is fighting back in subtle ways. The State Department has started lobbying through what analysts call defense diplomacy. New cooperation packages are being offered, discounted Patriot upgrades, joint exercises, and even intelligence sharing incentives, but only for allies who commit to US-made systems. In effect, America is saying, stay in our defense orbit and we'll protect you. Step out and you're on your own. It's not a threat, it's leverage, and everyone in Brussels knows it.
Yet, for many Europeans, this debate isn't anti-American, it's overdue. They see what happened in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in the Indo-Pacific. US resources stretched thin, political divisions paralyzing Congress, and production lines hitting limits. If Washington can't even guarantee its own defense funding on time, can Europe still depend on it in the next crisis? The answer, for many, is no.
That's why the drone wall became more than a shield. It became a declaration of intent to build, to own, and to defend using European hands. But that independence carries consequences. If NATO splits technologically, its joint operations could slow to chaos. Different encryption systems, different targeting data, different communication frequencies. In war, that's not variety, that's vulnerability. And the Kremlin knows how to exploit it. Russia's defense planners have already updated their strategies to exploit what they call the interference gap, the period when NATO's mixed systems can't communicate seamlessly. They predict it'll last until 2029. That's 4 years of potential weakness, 4 years when drone and electronic warfare attacks could bypass fragmented defenses. But while Europe debates and Russia adapts, another player is moving quietly: China. Beijing has begun exporting its Silent Hunter anti-drone lasers and Skynet jammers to African and Middle Eastern nations once dominated by Western suppliers. Every lost European contract means an opening for China's low-cost tech diplomacy. And once a country switches ecosystems, it rarely switches back.
That's the real danger Washington fears, not just Europe building its own drones, but Europe opening the door for others. The more the alliance fragments, the easier it becomes for global rivals to sell alternatives, influence policy, and divide markets. So who wins this drone war? Not the one with the best machines, but the one that wins the trust of allies. That's the invisible currency driving this entire conflict: trust. The Coyote was designed to destroy enemies, but now it's being tested by friends. If Europe walks away from American defense tech, Washington loses more than sales. It loses the unspoken authority that defined post-war security for 70 years. And if Europe fails to deliver a working alternative, it risks a fragmented sky, one where no one truly commands the air. This isn't a story about drones, it's a story about identity. Who leads, who follows, and who gets to decide what security really means in the 21st century. The drone wall may rise across Europe's borders, but its real foundation lies in trust, or the loss of it. And somewhere in a Raytheon warehouse in Arizona, thousands of Coyote interceptors sit waiting, symbols of an alliance that once spoke with one voice, now echoing with hesitation. The next time a drone crosses NATO airspace, the question won't just be whether it's intercepted. It will be whose system did it, and whose future that decision really secures.